right, how does it look to you now,
Yes,
David?
looks good now.
Excellent.
You can read all the text and everything.
That's important. That's what I like to hear. Great. All right. Well, I think that we should just hop right into it, and I'm sure people will join us throughout. So
Sounds great.
I'm Sam. I am DCSWA's vice president. Very, very excited to have David here with me this evening. So thank you all for joining. So David is a marine conservation biologist, and he's going to tell you a bit about himself, a bit about his work, and of course about this book, which he just wrote called Why Sharks Matter. And so I think we're just going to hop right into that. And then afterwards, we will have plenty of time for everyone to be able to ask questions. And like I said, please go ahead and throw questions in the Q&A anytime while David's talking, while we get the Q&A started. I'm very excited about this. So David, I'm going to stop sharing.
Sounds good.
And
I will start sharing.
Pass it over to you. Great.
All right. Are you seeing a title slide?
Yes, I am.
We did it. All right. I believed in us the whole time.
Perfect.
Great. So let's go ahead and get started here. My name is Dr. David Shiffman. I am a marine conservation biologist who studies sharks and how to protect them. I live and work in the Washington, D.C. area, and I'm a new member of the board of the DC Science Fighters Association. I'm an interdisciplinary conservation biologist, and what that means is I don't just study the fish, but I also study the people side. I study the law. I study the economics. I study the policy. I study what do people know? What do people think? What do people want? And that means that sometimes I get to spend my time out on boats tagging sharks like you see in some of these pictures. And sometimes I get to speak with government officials. And sometimes I get to dress up like an idiot and speak in schools. And sometimes I speak to journalists and things like that, just how I got involved with the DC Science Fighters Association. But I also got to write this book, which incorporates my experiences from all of this. I'm also very active on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I invite you to follow me there at Why Sharks Matter. We should have plenty of time tonight to answer any questions that anyone has. But if you think of a question later, or if I don't get to your question for whatever reason, you can feel free to ask it on one of my social media platforms. I'm always happy to answer any questions that anyone has about sharks over there. So I've loved sharks for a really long time. This is me when I was 4 years old at my family's cabin in upstate New York. I always had that inflatable shark. I also had shark t-shirts and shark toys. I feel like most kids go through a shark thing or a dinosaur thing or sometimes an outer space thing. And I just sort of never grew out of mine. And I want to tell you a little bit tonight about why I love sharks so much and what I've learned in a career of loving them and studying them. And in doing so, I want to introduce to you some of the themes of my new book. I will have, and afterwards, I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes here, and then for the rest of the hour is going to be for you guys to ask me questions, anything that you want to know about my talk tonight, or the book, or something you've heard about sharks, or marine biology, or ocean conservation, or anything like that. You can type your questions into the Q&A box, and Sam will moderate later. And I will get to your questions right at the end. So why do I love sharks so much? Well, for one thing, they're absolutely amazing. They're an incredibly biodiverse group of animals. They come in just about every shape, size, and color that you can imagine. They live all over the world in a huge variety of habitats. And they have all sorts of incredible abilities and behaviors. I want to introduce you briefly to some of my favorite weird and wonderful sharks here, noting that according to the latest issue of Sharks of the World, there are 536 known species of sharks, and there's a new species of shark, skate, ray, or chimera, the sharks and their relatives, that's discovered somewhere in the world about once every 2 weeks. So there's plenty left to discover. Here in the lower right, you have what's called an American pocket shark. And it's not called that because it's small enough to fit in your pocket, though it is. It's called that because of this weird pocket of flesh it has behind its head that contains glow-in-the-dark liquid that it can squirt to scare away predators. You don't often think of sharks as having predators, but when you're small enough to fit in a pocket, you have plenty of predators. In the lower left here, you have the megamouth shark. Its scientific name is Megacosma pelagios, the giant mouth of the deep. By most scientific names translate to something like the gray bird with the brown spots on its head. So by scientific standards, this is practically poetry. Lately, I've been identifying more and more with the shark in the center here. That is the angular rough shark. You think of sharks typically as being super powerful, fast athletes with streamlined bodies. The angular rough sharks are basically the opposite of that. They are the couch potatoes of the ocean. So you can understand why I've been relating to them more and more the last couple of years. But they are still fearsome predators if you are a small crab. There's all sorts of weird and wonderful species here. Speaking of glow-in-the-dark sharks, this is a kite fin shark. This is the largest of the glow-in-the-dark sharks, but there is an entire family of glow-in-the-dark sharks called the lantern sharks. My favorite lantern shark is called the ninja lantern shark, and it's called that because my friend Vicky Vasquez, who discovered it right around Thanksgiving and went home to her family for Thanksgiving and said, I discovered this new shark. What should I name it? And her young cousin said, ninjas are cool. You should call it the ninja shark. So she did. This is a goblin shark, another deep sea weirdo. Lots of animals can hyperextend their jaws, sticking them in front of their face like that, but nothing does it as far or as fast as the goblin shark. That video is slowed down 100 times so you can see it. In the upper right here, that video is not slowed down. That is how fast Greenland sharks swim. They are the slowest moving large animal on Earth. But they're in no particular hurry because they're also the longest lived vertebrate on Earth. They can live to be over 400 years old, and they are not considered reproductively mature adults until they're in their 160s, which means a Greenland shark born on the day that Canada was confederated as a modern country is still a teenager. This is a thresher shark. They use their long tails, which can be as long as the rest of their body, to whip and stun prey. It makes a shockwave in the water that knocks small fish unconscious. And that's a hammerhead. They use their hammers, among other things, to pin flatfish to the ground. It's also extra surface area for the shark's amazing sixth sense. They can detect electric fields given off by all living things, which means if there's a prey animal hiding under the sand where you can't see it or hear it or smell it, they still know it's there because they can sense the electricity given off by its beating heart. That is also what the weird horn-like structure on the goblin shark is for. So sharks are absolutely incredible. Sharks are also not a threat to people. Every once in a while, someone does get hurt by a shark, and very, very, very rarely someone is killed by a shark. But this is just astronomically rare. And one reason why people think that it's much more common than it is because of movies. Specifically Jaws. If I ask you to visualize a shark, many of you will think of the shark from Jaws. That movie just had its 47th anniversary last week, and it still has totally captured the imagination of the world. You think about this when you go to the beach. There's actually something called the Jaws effect in the public policy literature because of how much this movie has transformed the world. To give you a sense of how much of not a threat to humans sharks are, here are some things that kill more humans than sharks in a typical year. Vending machines kill about 12 Americans every year. These things are death traps. And there's one in every school in America. Sharks kill 1 to 3 humans a year. Flower pots falling on your head from above while you walk down the street kills 5 to 8 Americans a year. I never really understood that statistic until lockdown started, and I watched some of my neighbors try to set up patio gardens for their herbs, and some of them did not do it very well. So now I understand where this comes from. And as a social media guy, I love this statistic. More people in a typical year fall off cliffs while trying to take selfies of the beautiful scenery around them and die than are killed by sharks. So sharks are absolutely incredible, and they are not bad. They are not a threat to humans. But not only are they not bad, but they're actively good. Sharks help keep the food web in balance. And when we're talking about the ocean, this is a food web that billions with a B of humans depend on for food, and tens of millions of humans depend on for jobs. We very much want the oceans and our coastal ecosystems to be healthy, and a big part of that is making sure that the food web is intact. Let me briefly orient you here to this food web diagram. Don't worry if you can't read all of this, but each rectangle here represents a fish or a marine mammal or a plankton or a bird that lives off Cape Cod. And all of the black lines are an ecological interaction between these. This eats this. This competes with this for space. So food webs are complicated is the main takeaway here. But when you start thinking about this in terms of loss of species, if you pull one or two of these threads out of this ecosystem, the Northwest Atlantic Ocean is going to be fine. If you pull 10 of these out, I start to get worried. If you start to pull 25, 50 of these threads out, then we're talking about an apocalyptic level event. Without top predators, entire ecosystems can unravel. So sharks are not only amazing, but they're important, and we are better off with healthy populations off our coast than we are without them. Unfortunately, we are losing many species of sharks. And the problem is so bad that this infographic, which is only 5 years old, is already out of date. It's already worse than this. This infographic says about a quarter of all known species of sharks and their relatives are considered threatened with extinction by the IUCN Red List. It's now about a third, and that's changed just in the last 5 years. And many species of sharks are in trouble because of us. It's unsustainable overfishing is the threat. Climate change is a relatively minor threat to sharks. Plastic pollution is essentially not a threat to sharks at all. Unsustainable overfishing is the biggest threat by far. Climate change and plastic pollution are major threats to other ocean groups and to the ocean as a whole, but not really to sharks. Another thing that I've learned is that this is not an unsolvable problem. We have the ability to change our laws and change our behaviors to help sharks. We can fix it, and we should fix it. In fact, this is a big part of the reason why I wanted to write the book specifically, that there has not been previously an accessible to the public guide to the different laws and policies that are out there. If you read other shark books, it'll just say something like sharks are in trouble and they need our help, and then say one little thing that you can do to help. For those of you that are super policy nerds, I invite you to check out my open access review in the journal Animal Conservation. But otherwise, there are several chapters of the book dedicated specifically to explaining all the different laws and policies that are out there. So sharks are important, they're in trouble, but we can fix it. We can help them. Another important thing that I've learned is that there are lots of people who want to help and are trying to help, and that's great. But wanting to help and trying to help are not the same thing as actually helping. We even have a cliche about this: the road to hell is paved with good intentions. There are lots of people who want to help, who are well-intentioned, but they don't understand key facts about the threats to sharks or the available policy solutions. There are also lots of people who are unscrupulous and exploit the well-intentioned but uninformed. I have colleagues in misinformation and disinformation studies in far more controversial issues than shark fisheries management. They work in GMO foods or climate change or carbon capture and storage. And they're shocked at how much misinformation and disinformation there is about sharks. For some vivid examples here of wanting to help and trying to help are not helping, there are a group of scuba divers who engage in what I call, and I'm trying to get this term into the peer-reviewed technical literature, macho cowboy idiot behavior, where they hug and kiss and ride and flip over free-swimming sharks for pictures on Instagram, and they say that they are helping sharks in this way. I am teaching people that sharks aren't dangerous by annoying them. This has never really made a ton of sense to me. I don't know what the hell this is, but it's not science, it's not education, and it's not conservation. Those of you who do follow me on social media know that this is a particular bugaboo of mine. These petitions made on change.org to stop shark finning in Florida. There's usually 4 or 5 of these a year, and they get 30, 40, 50,000 people signing this petition to stop shark finning in Florida. Shark finning is a commonly misunderstood and misused term. I go into this in some detail in the book, but for the purpose of understanding why I'm annoyed that 40,000 people in April signed a petition to stop shark finning in Florida, is we banned shark finning in Florida in 1993. And I don't necessarily expect everyone in the world to know every nuance of natural resource management policy, but if you are leading a high-profile policy change campaign, you should be aware of what the current policy is. And I don't think that's too much to ask. There are also many other examples of people trying to help, but doing things that are not especially helpful. So these are some of the things I've learned. So why did I write another shark book? There are lots of shark books out there. I have 3 shelves of them behind me, but there's never been a book like Why Sharks Matter before. There's never been a book that has even tried to do what this book does, which is take all the complicated science and ecology and conservation and law behind the current state of ocean conservation and shark conservation and explain it to a non-expert lay audience. It's something that I have a lot of practice with as a public science communicator, as a science teacher, as someone who loves giving talks and speaking in schools. I've been a blogger for about 15 years. I've written news articles for National Geographic and Scientific American and the Washington Post. I have a monthly column in Scuba Diving magazine where people can write in and ask a marine biologist anything. So I have a lot of practice with this, and I wanted to try to see if we could explain all of the technical nuance of this to a non-expert audience. And the end result is Why Sharks Matter. So I am in the midst of a book tour. It is currently in 36 cities and 4 countries and counting. In the next few weeks, I'm going to be going to Richmond, to Virginia Beach, to Calvert Cliffs, Maryland. I was just in Baltimore last weekend. I was just in Miami last week. I have Corpus Christi and San Antonio coming up. But if you are there listening and you represent a group that has a potential audience for me, let's chat. I am happy to talk to anyone about this, and I have a longer version of this talk that I can give. We wanted to keep it short, relatively short tonight, so to give people plenty of time for questions. So you can reach out to me afterwards. I want to thank the DC Science Writers Association, especially Richard, for helping to recruit me to come along, and Sam for organizing this event tonight. I want to thank my friends and colleagues for years of fact checking and proofreading this book as I was going through it. I want to thank my publishers at Johns Hopkins University Press, especially Tiffany, Kat, and Kate. I want to thank you for listening, and I want to thank my family for always supporting this crazy career goal of mine to be a marine biologist when I grew up. I think my parents always thought I would grow out of this, but they were always very supportive. And now Dad even brings his golf buddies to come out shark tagging with me in Florida. So thanks to everyone for listening. At this point, I am happy to answer any questions that anyone has about sharks. This is an Ask Me Anything You Want About Sharks booth that I had set up at the Cygnus Eye conference in 2019. And I got up to go to the bathroom, and when I got back, there was a little kid who had sat down in that chair and was fielding people's questions about sharks and getting most of them largely right. So I just love this photo, and that was a fun adventure. I'm going to stop screen sharing now, and then again, please ask your questions either in the chat box or the Q&A. We can see both. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm going to have Sam MC here.
Great. Thank you so much, David. That was wonderful. Do you kind of think of that little kid who took over your booth as sort of like a mini version of you or something? I feel like there's some...
I was so shocked when that happened that I was sort of stunned, but man, do I wish I had kept in touch with that kid. He was maybe like 6. I don't know what the heck he was doing at the Cygnus Eye meeting. Must have been someone's kid or someone who worked at the convention center, but it was hilarious. And I just stood there for like 10 minutes watching him answer people's questions. It was great. Yeah,
that's great. That's wonderful. So we've got some questions coming in, which is great. Keep them coming. If people could please put them in the Q&A and not in the chat box, that would be super helpful for me. Oh, no, I think you said the Q&A. Okay. It's just helpful for me to not be looking in many different places. So first, I have a question for you.
Great.
When did you first get the idea for writing this book, which really is a question about how long that process was from having an idea, maybe scribbling down some notes, to actually publishing?
My best friend, Dr. Andrew Thaler, we met freshman year in college, and that was 2003, to date myself there. And he said I was already talking about writing the book then. I had the title of the book, Why Sharks Matter, before I had my social media handles. So those of you who have followed me on Twitter, I've been on Twitter without Why Sharks Matter since 2009. And I had the title of the book before that. So I've been working on the book in various forms for a very long time. I signed the contract in summer of 2019 and started working on it more intently. But at that point, I already had a couple chapters basically fleshed out and outlines for other things. But man, the lockdown was not great for much, but it did sure give me a lot of extra time for writing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's a silver lining. So I have a question from Phil Karp,
Oh, great. Hi, Phil.
who asks, how do you feel about shark encounter tourism, particularly if it involves provisioning? And I personally don't know what provisioning is. So if
Yes,
you
so
could start off
I'll
with an
tell you all about that.
explanation.
So
Great.
this is people who go scuba diving with sharks for fun. And provisioning is putting bait or chum in the water to attract sharks to you while you're scuba diving. So it's different from going scuba diving on a coral reef and you happen to see a shark. It is usually you kneel in a corner or kneel in a circle and a sandy bottom, and they put bait in the water and sharks swim all around you.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So there are a few different types of this, and some of them are fine and some of them are problematic. So I know every journalist hates this answer from every scientist of it depends, but it depends. There are certainly some ways that you can do scuba tourism, including with provisioning, where it's not especially disruptive or harmful to the shark and can be plenty safe for humans. A great analogy that my PhD advisor used was when talking to our undergraduate interns was, let's say your parents are in town for Parents Weekend and they're taking you out for a nice fancy steak dinner. And on your way to meeting them, there's a student club giving out free pizza on the quad. You might take a slice of pizza. It's a snack, but you're still going out for your nice dinner. It's not disrupting your behavior that much. So if it's just a little bit of food, it's not going to mess with them that much. But there are some places where it's a lot of food, and there were some sharks in the Bahamas that for 15 years, every day a motorboat came and they put chum in the water and they put scuba divers in the water. And then in March 2020, that stopped happening. What is that going to do to the sharks? It was apparently the first people to get back in the water in July of 2020 said it was pretty hairy.
Yeah.
So this can disrupt behaviors if not done safely.
Yeah.
And there are some, this is the macho cowboy idiot scuba diver behavior. Notably, macho cowboy idiot is a gender neutral term. Many of the worst offenders are women. But I'm trying to get macho cowboy idiot into the peer-reviewed technical literature, and I'm optimistic about my chances. I did manage to get big boy pants into the peer-reviewed scientific literature because one of my interview subjects said it about shark fishing.
That's pretty fun. Well, good luck.
Thanks.
So let's see. We have a question from, or more a comment from Elizabeth Connor, who says, it's interesting that plastics don't seem to be a threat to sharks. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
I'm happy to elaborate on that.
Yeah.
So the ways that plastic can hurt marine life, there's sort of three things. One is entanglement, that if it's something like a net or fishing line or those six-pack rings, you can get stuck in it and choke and die. That does happen to sharks, but all of the sharks that have been killed by that ever are less than the amount of sharks killed in an hour by commercial overfishing. And the other is you ingest it and either get toxicity from the chemicals or it blocks your digestive tract. And that also happens with sharks. But all of the sharks that have been killed by that ever are fewer than the sharks that are killed in 1 hour of commercial overfishing. So if we totally fix the plastic pollution crisis, but don't fix overfishing at all, sharks are still hosed. If we totally fix overfishing, but don't fix plastic pollution at all, sharks are doing great.
Okay, thanks for breaking that down. That's helpful.
Sure.
I have a couple questions from Leanne. Leanne, I apologize. I don't know if it's pronounced Weiberg or Weiberg, or maybe a third pronunciation that I'm not coming up with right now. But she has a few questions for you. So
yes.
In your tour, which countries are you visiting and why? And she's also wondering kind of where, when you write a book, where funding for tours comes from.
Yeah, the funding is all the venues. It's not the publisher. It's the places where I'm speaking are bringing me. This is different if you use a Penguin or a Random House type level of publisher. I have an academic press, which I've been very, very happy with, but they have sort of different, it's a different level of resource situation. So I've arranged it all mostly through my social media connections. I just put out on Twitter like, hey, I'm going to be in South Texas and I have a few days. And then the Texas State Aquarium said, come speak with us. And the San Antonio Zoo said, come speak with us. And a Corpus Christi bookstore said, come speak with us. So things like that. And then the venues cover my travel costs and speaking fees. The places where I'm speaking are the US and Canada. I live in the US. I used to live in Canada, so I'm going back to see friends, but because one of those friends works at a biodiversity museum, they arranged for me to speak there. So now it's a work trip. I am going to a conference in Spain in the fall. While I'm there, the organizers wanted to have some of their public science communicator experts give a public facing event. So I'm speaking in Spain. And then I also work part-time in the UK, so I'll be speaking there. But more stuff added all the time. I'm open to anything, anywhere that has an audience and a speaker travel budget. Let's chat.
That's great. Thank you. I have a question from Karen Starling.
Yes.
So this is a little bit longer, and I also
yeah.
don't know what some of the
So yeah, I can translate here. Okay, so this is I'm apparently able to see the Q&As as a panelist.
Oh, okay, great.
So Karen is asking.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say I can. Oh, you're going to explain the question.
Yeah, for the other ones, I'll let you read it, but this one has some nuancy stuff, I think.
Okay.
So Karen is asking about a science organization called OSearch, which if you have that shark tracker app on your phone, or if you see the news headlines about a tagged great white shark is off Ocean City this week, that's them. They're very high profile. They have a very dedicated media operation. And she's asking about some controversies surrounding the ways that they tag the sharks. I would say that those controversies are largely overblown. The one advantage of putting a GPS tracker tag on a shark is for sure that that shark is still alive and fine, because it's broadcasting, here I am migrating around. So there are a lot of weird haters of OSearch that I don't really understand where that comes from. It has to do, some of it is these anti-science extremists that I rant about all the time. Some of it is people being taken advantage of by those people. And some of it is OSearch does perhaps not the greatest job of promoting the other science that they do. If all they did was this GPS tracking, which is some of the criticisms that I see of them, like all they're doing is doing this GPS tracking. And we already know that great white sharks migrate all over the place. That's not all they do. They're involved in dozens of different scientific research projects with institutions all over the world. They just don't do as good a job of promoting that stuff. But lots of my friends and colleagues work with them. I have been on their boat once. We didn't catch any great white sharks that day. We caught 3 the next day after I left. That is always my luck with such things. But yeah, I hope that addressed your question there, Karen.
Yeah, and thank you for breaking that down for the rest of us who don't have a background in this. So Nala Rogers has a question about overfishing. So who is mostly doing the overfishing, and then who is eating the sharks, which I assume, Nala, I'm assuming you mean the sharks that are then caught or that bycatch during overfishing.
Yeah,
potentially. Great. I guess it could be either. Sorry, so I take it back.
No problem. Hi, Nala. Looks like you got the email link working. That's great. So overfishing of sharks is a global problem. This is often presented as being an issue of Asia, and it's not. As I've said on Twitter a few times recently, if your shark conservation advocacy involves screaming at China and Japan and is silent about Spain and Portugal, then you're not interested in saving sharks. You just want to scream at Asian people, because Spain and Portugal are massive problems with overfishing, and I never see them mentioned with the same vehemence. I have also encountered some activists who have explicitly said to me that they find a bowl of shark fin soup, which is a traditional Asian delicacy, that's what the shark finning is related to. They find that to be morally repugnant, but a grilled shark steak, that's fine, because that's how normal people eat fish. That is not a conservation attitude. That's just straight up racism. But this is absolutely a global problem. There's over 100 countries involved in shark fishing. The United States is one of the 15 largest shark fishing countries in the world, though ours are largely very sustainable and well managed. I have people on social media all the time who tell me, like, I saw a boat in Florida that was fishing for sharks. Obviously that's against the law. Who can I call? Like, it's not against the law. It happens all the time, and it's legal and science-based. The shark meat is consumed mostly in North America, Europe, and South America. The shark fins are consumed mostly in China, Japan, Thailand, South Korea, and those diaspora communities around the world. But shark fishing is a global crisis, and any solution that is just yelling at one country or one ethnic group is not a solution that's likely to be especially helpful.
Right. Thank you for breaking that down.
Sure.
So Let's see. So this is somewhat related to that question, I think, just kind of thinking about overfishing or maybe bycatch. So Leanne asks, or says that shrimping boats have turtle exclusion ports, so turtles don't get hauled up. Is there something similar for sharks to exclude sharks from that?
Yeah. So in the 1990s, there was this major crisis with sea turtles. This is when lots of sea turtles became endangered and critically endangered, that they were caught as bycatch in these big shrimp trawls in the Gulf of Mexico and Florida. And a fisherman actually solved this problem by creating this trap door that they call a turtle excluder device. That shrimp are not heavy enough to trigger the trap door, so shrimp still get caught in the net. But a big heavy sea turtle will trigger the trap door and can swim out and will be fine. That is what we call a gear modification as a way to reduce bycatch. And there are lots of ways. Bycatch is accidentally catching something else that's swimming by what you're trying to catch. So the sea turtles are bycatch of the shrimp. Sharks are often bycatch of tuna fisheries and things like that. There is something very similar to this escape grate that's used in some trawl nets that works for sharks. But there are also lots of other things that you can do to reduce the catch of sharks. One of those things, it has to do with what your hooks are made out of and how they're attached to the line. We used to use stainless steel for that. Nothing can bite through stainless steel. So if a shark gets hooked on a tuna hook, it's stuck. Now they've switched to using regular fishing line, monofilament line, because a tuna is not strong enough to bite through that, but a shark is. So if a shark gets caught, it can bite through and swim away and be fine, and it'll have a hook in its mouth for a few weeks, but then that rusts out and falls out. Some of the stuff, this is one that I think is really cool. I mentioned earlier that sharks have this electromagnetic sense. So, and tunas don't have that. So if you get a hook and you put what's called a rare earth metal magnet on it, it makes an electromagnetic field that a shark will swim up to the hook and then go, what's that? And swim away. And tunas just get caught like it's normal. So there are tons of solutions about this. This is actually what my day job is all about, is finding bycatch reduction solutions. For other species, like for marine mammals, trying to get them away from hooks, there's something called a pinger, which just makes a really annoying high-pitched noise that fish can't hear, but dolphins can, and it makes the dolphins swim away. For sea turtles, there's a particular wavelength of green light that's just exactly in sea turtles, like, that's awful zone. But other fish don't even see it. So if you put this green light on a net at night, you still catch your other fish, but sea turtles swim away. So there's a ton of these solutions. They're all context specific. They're all case specific. So this is another, it depends. But the short answer is yes, there are things like that for sharks.
Great, thank you. So Karen Starling has a follow-up to the shark tourism question. So she says, or Karen, I apologize if it's Karin, and I've never seen Karen spelled that way, so I'm not sure. But they say, I recently did my first ever cage diving in South Africa.
Cool.
An incredible experience seeing bronze whalers, short-tail stingray, juvenile hammerheads, and 7-gill sharks. That's cool. Life-changing for me. Water was baited and the sharks drawn to the cages, but the operators were very science oriented. Is this a type of shark tourism and education that you think is okay?
Yes, this is generally fine. It can be very well done. It can be done poorly, but generally, if someone just seems like they're not acting like a macho cowboy idiot, they're probably fine. The macho cowboy idiot people are not subtle. They usually advertise it on their website. They usually will demean science and scientists. Like those people are just collecting data forever. Well, we're actually out here doing something. Come on. So yeah, if a lot of these boats provide free space or data or things like that for scientists. A lot of them have their own in-house scientists. Some of them do a real emphasis on, while you're having this amazing experience, we want you to learn about some local conservation issues and how you can help. It can be really well done. The group that I worked with when I went out in South Africa cage diving was Chris Fallows. He's Shark Week famous, but is also an author and a published scientific author in his own right. And he has a great book about 30 years of observing great whites in South Africa called Great White and Eminent Gray. And it's like poetry describing fish. It's just spectacularly well written. I like him. He does good work. There are a few others in the area that do good work.
Great, thank you. So Phil Karp has another question for you. If someone wants to make a donation to support shark conservation, which NGOs would you recommend that they contribute to?
Yeah. So my go-to shark conservation nonprofit is called Shark Advocates International. It's sharkadvocates.org. They're at Shark Advocates on Twitter and Facebook. Sonia has not joined Instagram yet, but I did get her on Twitter and Facebook. I was very excited about that. In the book, you'll meet, I introduce you to 10 scientists and 2 conservationists. They get their own page to just tell about their own work and how people can learn more about them and help them. And Sonia is one of those. There are also a variety of nonprofits that do some great work and some stuff I'm not sure. Shark Advocates International is my go-to that I can recommend wholeheartedly without any issues.
Great. Nala is curious what messages or concepts you have found to be the most difficult to get across to people. So, and then what strategies have seemed to work when communicating those tricky messages?
Yeah. So a lot of times my target audience is commercial fishermen, which are not a group known for especially loving conservation, not a group especially known for loving management, not a group especially known for loving scientists or educated city folk. There was one particular case with a recreational charter guy that I had interviewed and wrote a paper about. And he referred to me, which we mentioned in the paper, as a pompous, pale-skinned bookworm. And I got an email from my dad that just said, pompous, pale-skinned bookworm is like the best thing I've ever heard. So that was very, very exciting to know that dad actually reads my papers, at least when they're insulting me. But working with this group is tricky because if you say, this tends to be a very politically conservative, demographically quite homogenous group. And in that group, if I start talking about climate change, they're just going to tune me out. That's that liberal science nonsense, whatever. But if I start talking about how things ain't what they used to be, every fisherman has a story about this weird, they've been fishing there for 30 years and they've never seen this fish and now they're there all the time. That's weird. Or I've been fishing here for 30 years and the fish always used to spawn this time of year and now they're spawning a month and a half earlier. That's weird. And all of that is climate change. But if you say climate change, they're going to tune you out. So some of it is word choice. Some of it is tone and how you carry yourself. I have had some of these commercial fishing guys tell me, I've been doing this for decades and you're the first scientist I've ever talked to who doesn't seem like you think I'm stupid and didn't make me feel stupid. Some of that, how I accomplish some of that is self-deprecating humor. That the rough and tumble fisheries guys are used to scientists thinking we're better than them, so they appreciate it when I make jokes about basic stuff I can't do. This is notably a group that I, as a white guy, can do that with. That people from other demographic groups, if they tried that, it would not have the same effect. So there are things like that. Jargon, lots of exercises with jargon, explaining stuff clearly, tone, making sure that they understand that I am explaining it to them because I think it matters and not because I think they're stupid for not knowing it already. Listening as much as you talk, asking them for help rather than telling them what to do. A lot of this is just being treated with respect. These are people that are not used to being treated with respect by scientists, and just remembering their names has gone a long way in a lot of things. Remembering their wife's names or their kids' names has gone a long way in some settings. So a lot of it's practice, but it's basic science communication exercises, but it comes down to know your audience.
Yeah, fine. It sounds like, finding a sort of a level ground to some degree, finding that connection, finding where there's overlap, maybe even too, between you and these people that you're speaking with. Nala says, oh, if I have to remember people's names, it's all over. You can just, maybe it would be kind of endearing if you had to be writing it down on a note card the whole time.
Yes, that's something I've always been very good at, is names and faces.
Yeah, that does seem like it'd be very helpful with the work that you do. Leanne has a question about the cover art for your
Yes.
book. Did you have a say in some of that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That I worked with them to choose some options, and they did some mock-ups, and I posted them on Twitter and let people vote. But like the one we picked was the one that I liked. Unfortunately, my Twitter followers agreed.
That's great. Elizabeth Connor has a question / comment, I'll say.
Yeah.
Is that the actual Jaws poster
It
that you are
is.
wearing?
Yeah, and I love this shirt. I showed Sam this before the call, but let's see if we can make this work. I love this shirt because it has the words on the back.
Yes. Oh, you're gone. Up, you're back. Up. We get it. We see
Okay,
it though.
yes.
Don't worry.
It says the dot 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 on the back.
Yeah.
Yes. So I like this shirt. I am attempting to wear a different piece of shark clothing at every single one of my book tour stops, and it will require some planning.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I mean, that's a lot of shark gear, but I mean,
I have a lot of shark gear.
I was going to say you've had years to accumulate it.
Yes.
So I'm curious, is there, I know there are many different misconceptions about sharks. You touched on a bunch of them, but is there one in particular that just really gets you every time, where you feel like you have to say, wait, I can't let you perpetuate this myth? Is there something that comes to mind?
There's one that's particularly egregious, that this idea that sharks don't get cancer. In fact, when I was just visiting my folks in Florida last week, Mom had found this book at her library book sale called Sharks Don't Get Cancer. It's not true. It is completely made up by snake oil salesmen who are trying to sell things and exploit the desperate. But even if it was true that sharks don't get cancer, eating shark would not cure my cancer any more than me eating LeBron James would make me better at basketball. That's just not how this works. So that's a particularly egregious one. This idea that that hugging and kissing sharks is useful conservation just drives me nuts. At least we're trying something. When criticized for what you're doing is bad is just drives me insane. Yes, the problem is you're trying something. Doing nothing is better than doing something bad. This is not a complex concept.
Okay, great. Thank
So
you.
there are many of these.
Yes. Yeah, no, I'm sure there are many that get under your skin, but it's good to keep a couple in mind. And it's good to be able to say, if someone does say, did you know that sharks don't get cancer? You can say, actually, they do.
Yes.
And don't buy anything that is using that as a way to market it to you.
Yes.
Julia Decker, I will answer your question. So you said that you see this presentation is being recorded. It is, and it will be available online. It will be on the DC Science Writers Association YouTube channel. But what I will do is I will also send out a link to that once it's up, which will probably be, if not later tonight, tomorrow. And then that way you can share it. It'll be available for anyone to watch.
Awesome.
And let's see, the next question I'm so excited for your answer with this one.
Oh no.
Because I think I know. I might know. So Karen Starling asks, what is your favorite bad shark movie? I'm putting this in quotes because it can be good, bad.
Oh yeah. No, the bad shark movies are a whole genre. I might actually get to be in Deep Blue Sea 4.
What?
Deep Blue Sea 1 was the one with Samuel L. Jackson and LL Cool J. Samuel L. Jackson gives that inspiring speech and a shark eats him. It's a fantastic movie. Deep Blue Sea 2 was terrible. Then they somehow greenlit a Deep Blue Sea 3, which was pretty good. And now they're working on a 4, and I've been talking with the director. So I might get to be an extra in Deep Blue Sea 4. But I got to go with either Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus here, which was the first in the Mega Shark versus Quintology, or Sharknado 2, the second one. The second in the, I don't know what a word is for 6 movies.
I'm not sure.
There are 6 Sharknado movies. The second one, Sharknado 2, the second one, that's what it's called. They rejected my write-in suggestion for Sharknado 2, Sharknado Harder. But I love these movies, and they're so dumb and they're so silly, but there's something to me about this idea that like my job is fodder for ridiculous B movies. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I always like with them that there's always like one little nugget of truth in them. And what that says to me is like one of the executive producers or screenwriters wanted to be a marine biologist when they were a kid or something.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's so fun to find those Easter eggs throughout. So I'm curious if there were any chapters that you ended up leaving out of your book, or sections or topics, just because either it didn't quite fit conceptually or there physically wasn't enough space. What was there things that you left? Were there things that you left on the cutting room floor that you think, oh, that would have been fun to have in there?
Not really. There was some stuff that we had talked about, some whole entire chapters about, like, maybe like this is not my dream vision of the book, but like if we need to get to 100,000 words, I could write about this. And they said we're good. But this is, it's very close. What we ended up with is very close to what my original vision and original pitch was. It was shaped by two very helpful anonymous peer reviewers, and one very helpful peer reviewer who was supposed to remain anonymous but called me and told me who he was. And it was also shaped throughout by the wonderful editorial staff at Johns Hopkins Press. But the end result, if you were to if 10 years ago me were to look over the index, I would not have been surprised by what's in here.
Great. It's great that there's been that consistency right throughout. You've known, like you said, you had the book title before your social media handles. You've known that this is something you want to write about. You've had a lot of years to think about what it would be in there. So I have another question for you related to writing the book. So for anyone who might be thinking about writing a science book, what do you wish someone might have told you before starting the process? This is very open-ended, but if you think back, like, oh, I wish I had known that I should have started this chapter sooner, or this part of it was going to be harder than I thought. Is there anything that stands out to you?
Yeah, I was very, very fortunate to have known a lot of friends and colleagues and mentors who had done this. So I asked a lot of questions at the start, and I got very, very, very good advice. So I would definitely recommend doing that. One thing that everyone told me that I didn't really believe, and it was absolutely true, was just how much time it was going to take. And I was like, oh, I at the point now that I can knock out a 750-word news article in a couple of hours. How hard can it be to write an 80,000-word book? And the answer is a lot more than writing 90. It's a lot harder than writing 90 news articles, because there has to be a consistent theme. It has to build. It has to be consistent tone. You can't repeat things. You can't omit things. You self-reference back a lot. So it just is an absolutely massive amount of time. And even if this is, I was just chatting about this, a colleague earlier today who's considering writing a book and had some questions for me. And like, even if this is the best-selling shark science book of all time, and I have no idea if it is, but I did just pass Jane Goodall on the Amazon Science bestsellers list, so that was cool.
Congrats.
Even if it's the best-selling shark science book of all time, like, it's, in terms of the number of hours I spent on it, like I could have made more money lifeguarding.
Yeah. So if you're looking for something super lucrative, probably don't start with science book writing.
Yeah, the speaking tour has been quite lucrative.
Okay.
But the writing part of it, I did sort of for fun.
Yeah.
I wrote this book for me, because I was sad there wasn't anything out there, and I wanted to see if I can do it. It's been very gratifying that people like it. Oh, I should note here, I will put in the chat here that I have a code for 30% off the book if anyone has not ordered it yet.
Yeah, definitely put that in the chat. That would be wonderful.
Oh no, I put that to hosts and panelists. Stand by, sorry, but it's Sharks 22 is the code, as in 2022. If you order it right from my publisher, Johns Hopkins University Press, and input code Sharks 22, it's 30% off. Those of you who are in the DC area, I'm happy to sign it. Those of you who are all over the place, I see some familiar names that I know I'm going to run into earlier this year. I'm happy to sign it there. But yeah, Sharks 22, 30% off if you order right from the publisher.
Amazing. Thank you. I have a question from Tyler Bowling,
Hi, Tyler.
Who says, if statistics aren't enough, how would you suggest someone work through their fear of sharks and be able to enjoy the ocean?
Yeah, I find that the funny statistics get through to people a lot. That like more people die not paying attention and taking selfies and fall off cliffs. Like, that makes people stop and think. But there's really no substitute for just getting out there and seeing, like, swimming with a shark and it leaving you alone. And if you think you've never done that, you're probably wrong. If you have been in the ocean, there was a shark not that far from you and it knew you were there. And you probably had no idea and had a lovely day at the beach. So humans are hardwired to be afraid of things that have teeth. There's a good reason for that. It's how we survived and got out of the savannah. But we're also not very good at risk assessment. So there's nothing quite like an experience of doing it and saying, wow, I saw a shark and it left me alone and it was actually really cool to hang out with it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good advice. So Leanne has a question specifically about Calvert Cliffs.
Yes.
And finding shark teeth. Do you mind giving everyone just a quick refresher of that story?
Yeah, so Calvert Cliffs is coastal Maryland. It's about 2 hours from DC, and it is one of the best places in the world to find fossil shark teeth. You just sort of dig in the beach and they're there. And there's also fossil shells and fossil whale vertebrae. It's super cool. That was one of the first things I did post-pandemic with friends who had kids because they could hang out outside. So we did that and it was a blast. The Calvert Cliffs Museum has some of the best fossil shark teeth in the world. I'm speaking there as part of their Shark Fest next Saturday. But the beach is notably pretty far from the parking lot, which I was not especially aware of. It's about a 2-mile hike on a fairly rough terrain while you're carrying everything that you need for the day. So if you're carrying a beach chair and a heavy duty shovel and a sieve to go through everything, like you're going to have to take some breaks. But the beach is also what a thing that Leanne asked there was about the tides. The beach is not very big. You're not going to drown if you go there at high tide, but you're not going to have a lot of place to sit. But there's a lot of guides online to how to do Calvert Cliffs. It's like entering Calvert Cliffs State Park is $5 per car. And then it's just find a parking space and walk to the beach. It's a very cool place.
I know, I need to check it out. I'm in the DC area, so.
Hey, I'm supposed to be planning one event a year for the DC Science Writers Association. You want to do that with some paleontologists from the Smithsonian?
That would be very cool. Yeah, I'm sure people would love that. So my last question for you before we really wrap things up is, do you remember seeing your first shark in real life? So not an aquarium, but like out in the open water. What was that experience like?
So first I'll say that the first sharks I saw in real life were in an aquarium because I grew up in Pittsburgh. And the first stop on my book tour was the Pittsburgh Zoo, and they set up this spectacular speaking area for me where behind me was the shark tank. So the first sharks that I ever saw when I was a kid were swimming behind me as I gave the book tour stop. That was pretty cool. The first shark that I ever saw in real life probably would have been at Sea Camp in the Florida Keys. That picture of me holding the shark, that was at Sea Camp in the shark science class. The person who invented that shark science class was reviewer number 3 of my book, who called me and told me it was him. But that it would have been probably a nurse shark in the Florida Keys at Sea Camp. And I've now seen thousands of sharks all over the world of 54 species and counting. I still feel the same way I did when I was a little kid and saw the first sharks at the Pittsburgh Zoo. Or the first time I got to hold one at Sea Camp. Last week when I was in Florida, it was with winners of a contest from my book that they donated to some charities I suggested, and then they got their names drawn to get to join me for a day of shark tagging. And they got to help with everything. And we had 2 days of that. 20 of my book readers got to come out and do shark research with us. And we got different sharks for them every day. And it was just a really special week.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's such a great idea. All right, well, with that, I see some enthusiasm for a Calvert Cliffs DCSWA trip. So
I will start working on this. This is a very achievable goal. This is a matter of renting a van.
I'm excited. It sounds great. So I'm going to quickly share my screen before people head out. Let's hope. Let's see.
Don't leave yet. We have announcements.
Yeah, don't leave yet. There are important announcements. End of class announcements. All right. Let's share this screen. How does that look?
It is the picture of me.
It is a picture of.
Or sorry, it is the text of me. It's not the.
Oh, how about?
It's not the professional development day thing.
Oh, how about
there
this?
It is. Yes, there it is. Links to purchase are in the event description.
Yes.
Sharks 22.
There we go. Sorry about that. So before you go, David is on social. Oh, every time I hit this, sorry. David's on social.
At Why Sharks Matter, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Yes. And then again, that code, Sharks 22, you said, David, and that is
Yes.
in the chat. And then
Yes.
I'm also the exec producer of a science podcast called Tiny Matters. And there's an episode coming out where I chat with David. I know we did just chat, but I do ask different questions in that than I did tonight. There is some overlap, but not entirely. And that will drop tomorrow morning at 7. And then very important, the DC Science Writers Association has our first professional development day in person in 2 years. So Professional Development Day was started way back in 2006. It's a day for people to, all kinds of science communicators, so journalists, PIOs, people who work in podcast, video, to come together to learn something new. It's a day of panels, a keynote talk, networking opportunities, a pitch slam. It's going to be great. And so you can either use that QR code right now, or you can go to DCSWA.org/events. And we would love to see you there. So thank you. Give me 1 second to just stop sharing the screen to say our farewells. I'm back. You're back. Everyone's back. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming this evening. This has been a lot of fun. I'm glad this could work out. David, thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks for having me. This was a blast.
And his book is wonderful. I have read it and learned a lot, because there's a lot to know about sharks. So I would definitely recommend you get it. And now you have a code. So there you go. You can get it for cheaper than I did. But thank you all so much. And again, like I mentioned, this recording will be available on YouTube. I will send out a link after this, and I will hopefully see some of your wonderful masked faces at the Professional Development Day in a month. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.